Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini episode, today I have a couple of bizarre stories, folks. This silent watcher appears in one article, and it's very disturbing. Another, an encounter with a gliding Mothman. Both accounts are truly fascinating, folks. So let's get into the first article. Silent watcher appeared at the foot of my bed and changed everything. This article also includes a sketch, folks, so let's get into it now. Something stood at the foot of that child's bed, watching with an unsettling calm that left no fear, only questions that would echo for decades. What he discovered years later about that towering figure hints at an encounter far stranger than anything he imagined. Let's get into the actual account now, folks. I was 8 years old and living in Bridgeport, Connecticut on May 5th, 1975. My mom just put me to bed for the night. I was laying in my bed, facing the wall, when I suddenly felt someone watching me. I rolled over onto my back and saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed, just watching me. It was tall, about 7 feet, and remained completely still. Surprisingly, I didn't feel any fear. I lay there, staring at it and studying its features. Although it appeared massive, it gave me no reason to be scared. It felt like we were observing each other for what seemed like an eternity. Then I heard a voice say, "Roll onto your side and sleep." I followed the voice's instruction and turned onto my side. I stayed that way for about a minute, and when I looked back toward the foot of my bed, the being had vanished. I got out of my bed to see where it had gone. All my windows were closed and locked. So, a very strange story, folks. What was this entity? From the description, it really feels like basically like it could have been, well, some sort of alien being, but it also feels sort of like one of the Men in Black, at least the way this guy drew the sketch of it, folks, and we'll look at it in a moment, folks. This figure looks sort of like basically a cross between the Mothman as well. As you can see, basically had big, almost insect-like eyes, but also had basically a snout coming out of it that reminds me of a gas mask. Maybe this being was related to possibly the Mad Gasser of Multoon. It really gives me that vibe. Either way, let's continue, folks, with the article. I walked into the living room where my parents were watching TV. They asked me what I was doing up, and I said I was thirsty. My mom walked me back to my room and gave me a drink, but I was still looking for the creature and found nothing. For many years after that sighting, I thought it might have been the boogeyman. It wasn't until I was 15 years old, watching a show about alien encounters, that I saw for the first time since my experience an alien being that resembled what I had seen that night. I was in complete shock and excited to discover what I had encountered at 8 years old finally. Since then, I have been searching for a picture of that being, but have yet to find it. I really want to learn more about what I witnessed and what did he witness, folks? Remember, I mentioned earlier the Mad Gasser of Multoon? Well, in that old story, folks, this phantom being, this phantom attacker, had this long snout that looked like a gas mask, folks, coming out of its face. In fact, the entire thing looked like a mask that this entity was wearing. So, when I basically saw this picture of this silent watcher, folks, it really reminded me of the Mad Gasser of Multoon. As I said, do you think they're somehow related? Maybe. I just do not know for sure, folks. It doesn't sound like other phantom attackers, folks, because he wasn't gassing this boy like the Mad Gasser or jumping and scaring the boy like Spring Hill Jack. Whatever this being was, folks, it was truly interesting and seemed basically to be studying the boy at best. Either way, let's move on to the next article. Norman, Illinois glider. Could it have been a Mothman? Let's hear this new account of a Mothman. Well, like being, folks, this glider. Let's get into it now and read the entire article. Witnesses expect to see fireballs during the torrid meteor shower. Still, on a quiet night in Norman, Illinois, something far larger glided out of the darkness with no sound and no visible source of propulsion. What followed forced a trained observer to confront an impossible silhouette that matched nothing in the sky except perhaps the legends of winged entities that are not supposed to exist. On November 10th, 2015, I was living in Norman, Illinois. I was watching for the torrid fireballs during the meteor showers. I turned off the lights in my house to make it dark outside and went to see if anything was happening. I stood there waiting for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I saw my first fireball. Knowing it would be a good night, I set up my Adrian Dack chair with a soft drink and a blanket cushion for a lengthy stay. Not expecting to see anything more than basically these meteors, folks. This guy got quite the surprise. And we're going to basically read all about it in a moment, folks. But as I've said before, folks, in these accounts, you just don't expect these beings to suddenly appear before you, like this man here, folks. But let's read in his own words what he described seeing that night, when he only expected to see just meteors, folks. I saw one or two small fireballs, was about to lose interest when, while facing north, I barely made out something coming straight at me, about 30 degrees above the horizon. It had no lights, made no noise, and seemed to be gliding. I couldn't make out what it was, but it appeared to be about 20 feet across, with something that looked like a hanging object underneath it. Not knowing what it was or what to expect, I tried to get a better look at this thing, but my mind and eyes wouldn't let me accept what I was seeing. It glided straight over my porch roof, so I jumped up and ran to the south end of the porch, waiting for it to come into view. When it did, it looked to be about 100 or 200 feet above me. I let out a loud yelp, shouting, "What is that?" along with some other choice words as I watched it glide out of sight. I imagine he was yelling something to that effect, folks, these choice words, along with basically saying, "What is that?" in as shrill a voice as possible, folks. But then again, maybe it was just basically screaming in a loud baritone. That could basically be what he meant when he said, shouting, "What is that?" Either way, we can only just imagine, folks, what kind of reaction we would have if we basically were faced with something like this. Either way, let's continue with the article, folks. I have some experience flying Cessnas and can judge altitude fairly well, but my estimation, if it had been a plane, I would have been able to read the numbers on it. I could see it clearly. It seemed to glide, but had no visible means of propulsion. It maintained a steady altitude, speed, and direction. At first, I wondered if it was a pterodactyl, but there was no visible head to confirm that idea. My mind was struggling to accept what I was witnessing. It seemed to be some entity. After searching online, I came across the Mothman concept, which resonated with my sighting eye. Thought I saw light-colored bags hanging down, which made me think they were legs. The wings looked dark brown. But that's enough about my thoughts. There you go. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, M. What did M see, folks? Was it really Mothman? Remember, this was in Illinois, where basically people are seeing basically Mothman all over that state and a little beyond it. But especially they're seeing it in Chicago and the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. So I'm not surprised that this man saw this winged flying cryptid, folks. But what he thought were this being's legs, folks, were, well, he said in his own words, looked like bags. Was this entity carrying something? Like the way basically people have described, well, or basically visualized how a pterodactyl will basically carry its prey. Or a better way to describe it, folks, the way birds carry away their own prey after they hunt it, folks. Was this thing carrying away something it was going to devour later on? Or were these really this being's legs, like the way M thought they were, folks? I don't know what this entity was, but people are seeing these entities, as I've said before, folks, all over Illinois. So maybe this was another Mothman-like entity, folks. They've also seen giant bats and giant owls in, well, Chicago as well, folks. But we have to ask, folks, is it possible that maybe this was an illusion? Did this guy somehow mistake what he saw for basically a Mothman? Because it's been said before, folks, that these entities can bend the way we see them, folks. So in reality, the actual entity could be anything, because it was making him see this bat-like or moth-like entity, folks. It could be anything. Perhaps it was even maybe an alien spaceship, and this is what this guy, though, didn't perceive because it was making him think it looked like this giant, well, pterodactyl-like thing, folks. Either way, very interesting, but we're now at the end. So please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics They're Bad For You. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions of the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.